Welcome back to the Britt Mayer Show, where we talk about culture, politics, faith, and health, and the stories that matter most to you. And one of those stories broke last night. Last night, a letter that was allegedly written by Charlie Kirk to Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was released for the public to read. Now, this has been the subject of a lot of debate. There have been a lot of allegations made over the full contents of this letter, part of which was revealed right after the assassination of Charlie Kirk by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on television. Since that airing of that portion of the letter, there has been so much dialogue about the full contents. Well, as of last night, we allegedly have the full contents of that letter. And I will say that Andrew Colvett, who is the executive producer of the Charlie Kirk Show and one of Charlie Kirk's best friends, did say last night on the Tim Cast show that the letter is real. So we have it on good authority that this letter is accurate, that it was written by Charlie Kirk to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and it would have been written in May. May 2nd is when the dating is. So I just wanted to cover the contents of this letter from a very neutral perspective, a balanced perspective, so that you know what the hubbub is, what the actually not what the hubbub is, what the actual contents of the letter reveal about Charlie Kirk and his relationship with Israel as of May 2nd, when this letter allegedly went to Mr. Prime Minister in Israel from Charlie Kirk. So let's start by just saying from the outset, I read the entire letter. I'm going to link it below. I encourage you to as well. It's 7 pages. And I'm just going to say the biggest takeaway I got was just how brilliant Charlie Kirk was. Truly, just such a master class of taking international relations that can be very complex. I studied international relations in college and thought that that was the direction I was going to go, and realized pretty quickly how nuanced and complex international relations are. Charlie was able to take a situation which has become very hotly debated in America with a foreign ally, a country that we consider one of our greatest allies in the Middle East. And he was able to put incredible thought into the relationship between these two countries into 7 pages in a way that's very practical, that the average person can read and understand. And I think there was probably intentionality behind why he wrote it in that framework, so that people like me, people like you can pick this up and read it and see the heart of Charlie and understand that his view on our relationship with Israel was very nuanced. It wasn't black and white. According to this letter, his view on Israel was nuanced. I'm going to say that again. So, anyone who is telling you that his relationship with Israel was only one way or only another is completely wrong, according to what we now have on good authority being a legitimate letter from Charlie Kirk to Benjamin Netanyahu. So, let's dive into it. So, in this letter, Charlie Kirk starts by saying, "One of my greatest joys as a Christian is advocating for Israel and forming alliances with Jews in the fight to protect Judeo Christian civilization." He goes on to say that it's critical that Jews and Christians stay united in the effort to contain and roll back radical Islam and Sharia law. And I will say that I have been doing a lot of deep dive into Charlie's position on Islam in America, and even, again, international relations, Islam out there, of Zohran Mamdani. Is that how he pronounces his last name? Mamdani, who is running for mayor of New York. And so I have been diving into like Islam in America and Islam in Dearborn, and what we're seeing with the mosques blaring the call to prayer every day or frequently. So I've been doing a lot of research into Charlie's concern. And I did want to note that I saw a lot of conversation in the weeks, in the months leading up to Charlie's assassination, where he was focused on the threat of Islam in America. And he thought we weren't talking about it enough, that we were not paying enough attention to it. So, right out of the gate, he says that it is critical that Jews and Christians stay united in the effort to contain and roll back radical Islam and Sharia law, which makes sense given how much he was talking about it from that May point when this letter was allegedly penned all the way through his assassination in September. Now, here is where the letter really landed. It landed early, and then it stayed there for most of this letter. He said, in my opinion, Israel is losing the information war and needs a communications intervention. He goes on to say that it's frustrating because pro-Israel surrogates like me should not be in charge of fact-checking every piece of anti-Israel misinformation that pours into social media. On my recent campus tours, half the questions I get are about Israel, and they are all negative. I often spend half my time on these campus tours defending Jews and Israel, which I am proud to do because I love Israel and I love the Jewish faith. He goes on to talk about a poll, the Harvard Harris poll, which reported 48% of ages 18 to 24 Americans support Hamas over Israel. And even in young MAGA circles, Israel is losing support. He really, in this letter, and you'll read it, he was deeply concerned with the communication war that he felt Israel was losing over here in America and seeing an uptick in Americans supporting Hamas over Israel. Again, I am going to present this to you and you guys can think about it and talk about it, but it's important for you to have background information if you're going to engage in the allegations and stories that are being told on behalf of Charlie Kirk. And this is all directly from his letter. So his concern was that Israel's losing the communications war, and this is a huge issue. He did call out social media a lot because his concern specifically was in that age 18 to 24 bracket. And then this is something that he said that I think is really important for you guys to hear. He said, I am accused of being a paid apologist for Israel when I defend her. However, if I don't defend Israel strongly enough, I'm accused of being anti-Semitic. I'm trying to convey to you that Israel is losing support even in conservative circles. This should be a 5-alarm fire. Okay, this part I starred because I want you guys to hear that. I'm going to read it again because I want you to hear just that first part. He says, I'm accused of being a paid apologist for Israel when I defend her. However, if I don't defend Israel strongly enough, I'm accused of being anti-Semitic. Okay, this is something that I really want you guys to pick up, that two things can be true. He was on Megyn Kelly. I think it was September. It was early in September, I believe, that he was on with Megyn Kelly, and maybe even before that as well, where this discussion about Israel, pressure from Israel, pressure stateside to be against Israel was really hitting the fan. And from my perspective, Charlie struggled with that. He struggled with, and that's where it goes back to what Andrew Colvett was saying, is Charlie's views on Israel were nuanced. They were not black and white. There was a lot of complexity in his thoughts on Israel, and you'll hear more of that in this letter. But I think it's important for you guys to hear that he was caught between a rock and a hard place where he had accusers coming at him saying, you're paid propaganda, you're a paid apologist for Israel. And then he had the Israeli crew saying, you're not doing enough, you're anti-Semitic. So he really wanted Benjamin Netanyahu to understand that he couldn't get it right no matter how hard he tried. And the pressure was on him because he was noticing an uptick in these questions coming from the younger demographic when he would travel onto campus. So I think that with this interview that he gave to Megyn Kelly, where he talks about the pressure from the pro-Israel side being very strong and that he didn't like it, can absolutely be true. And at the same time, it can be absolutely true that his accusations of being a paid apologist for Israel was too much for him. And that's what he said in this letter, that he had to write this on, I think he talks, yes, he says, I started to compose this letter to you on Easter. I should have been focused on my family, but I was getting bombarded with messages about the Israeli army making it difficult for Christians to access church in Jerusalem on Easter. And I didn't see any official statements pushing back on this narrative. And that's where he says it's frustrating because pro-Israel surrogates like me should not be in charge of fact-checking every piece of anti-Israel misinformation that pours into social media. I think he felt the pressure on both sides and was trying to convey that he didn't want to have to be the one doing all the work for either side because his views were so nuanced. But again, he started by saying that his greatest joy as a Christian is advocating for Israel and forming alliances with Jews in the fight to protect Judeo-Christian civilization, especially in light of radical Islam. So I think you guys should understand that two things can be true at the same time, that you don't have to say that he was explicitly only feeling pressure from the pro-Israel camp, or he was explicitly only feeling pressure from the anti-Israel camp, that he felt it from both sides. And he was in a tough position on both fronts. Now, it's also important to remember that Charlie was always American first, and that's what he conveyed to Megyn Kelly, was that yes, while international relations are important to him, especially because we'll get into it with the Holy Land and all of that, that was important to Charlie. He was at his core, he was America first. I'd encourage you guys, if you don't have it already, reading this a second time now from Charlie Kirk when he was 21, I think he wrote this, maybe 22, when he wrote this book, and reading it in hindsight of his assassination, it takes on a whole different meaning of what he was really trying to do. He loved America, but he also saw necessity in forging important relationships with those, our foreign allies, who he viewed could help restrain evil here in America and also overseas, in specific relation to the Holy Land, which he held to be very important. Okay, so let's go into some of the plans that he laid out in this. And this is where I think his brilliance just shines, and we didn't see it when he was here as much as we should have. So he gave unsolicited recommendations that he and his team had discussed for, I think he said a few months, that he and his team had conversations about this issue with Israel losing the information war, and especially on social media. And so he said 90% of the younger generations get their news from social media and podcasts, and there's very little pushback or fact checking by the Israeli government and or pro-Israel supporters in the media, especially on social media. And this is where he really gets into the practical. So he says, here is some unsolicited recommendations my team and I suggest if you are open-minded to a communications reset. For starters, you need a rapid response media team. So he talks about President Trump's White House Rapid Response 47 team. I use that all the time. I love going on there because I can see exactly what the White House is saying in response to anything that is against the Trump administration. They are on it, so that you don't have to, as a surrogate, go on and try to figure out what's true and what's not. And so he was suggesting, hey, you probably could learn from Trump and create a rapid response team like what Trump has. Then he says, number 2 is to put together a team of pro-Israel experts who can fact check misinformation in real time from Israel. He said, you lead and people like me will follow and provide supplemental support. If you're open to revamping your communications strategy, my team and I are happy to assist. And I want you to also take note of nothing in here talks about being paid or wanting money. And I think Andrew Colvett and Tyler, who are both big in Turning Point and were very, very close friends with Charlie, have said that Turning Point never took money from international relationships, that was a hard no. So I want you to notice that is not laid out at all anywhere in this letter that was, again, allegedly written. We have good authority that it was written by Charlie Kirk to Prime Minister Netanyahu. He says number 3 is to have an Israel Truth Network. He calls it the ITN, which can include social media channels and a one-stop source of information website where, for example, all the negative Israel questions I get can be thoroughly debunked. ITN could potentially be a news aggregation site for all news pertaining to Israel and Judeo-Christian efforts to preserve Western civilization. And I think it's in that little section that he talks about, or he might talk about it later on, just where it would be an advantage for Christian pastors or people who are curious about Judaism, about Israel, and are hearing all these things coming from social media that are definitely one-sided for the most part. They could go on to this Israel Truth Network and get the other side, because there's always more than one side to a story. So he was saying it would be in your best benefit to have a platform where people could access information and not have to try to sift and fish for it themselves. Number 4, he says, some of the released hostages could go on a speaking tour in the US. these hostages and all your spokespersons should be arguing that it's Hamas that is committing genocide on their own people by using civilians as human shields and storing weapons in schools, hospitals, etc. That information drips out in the regular media, but it is almost non-existent on social media. Again, he knew the heartbeat of the youth. And he'll go into this too, where he's like, your methodology for trying to reach people who are younger who consume news is missing the mark. You haven't evolved past the late night from a podium news feature that is great for the boomers, but you're missing the millennials and Gen Z. Number 5, he says maybe interview regular Israelis on the streets, asking them what they love about their country. Jews, Israeli Arabs, Druze, Orthodox, secular, etc. This could be an entire social media PR campaign called "Dude, you got us wrong." Interview Israelis from all walks of life. Let Israelis explain in their own words how Israel is a pluralistic society, a free country with elected leaders, unlike all of the surrounding authoritarian Arab nations. And then he even talks about how trying to sell support for Israel to America has been missing, that Israel has missed opportunities. So he says it would have been nice to have seen an Israeli plane with the Star of David arrive in the US full of supplies after a hurricane. Has Israel offered any assistance to the US insofar as technology to protect our border or with the missile defense shield President Trump has discussed? These are examples of effective messaging showing that Israel is a close ally of America. Consumers of social media are aware of the billions in supplies we send to Israel, but they are less aware of what America gets in return. Again, Charlie Kirk was brilliant. You don't have to agree with him, but the way that he strategized and saw missed opportunities and could effectively communicate that in a way that even I can understand or you can understand when it comes to the complexities and nuances of international relations is so unlike anything we've seen in a very long time. And he was 31, you guys. So if anything, I don't care if you disagree with him. I might disagree with him on a lot of points too, but he was a brilliant strategist. And that's what, again, that was my takeaway in this entire letter. He says the bottom line is Israel needs to learn to fish and to be more self-reliant when it comes to your communications strategy. He was saying, don't rely on other people to do it for you. If you want America to see you as a good friend and an ally to America and not just as a taker, a consumer of America's money, America's infrastructure, America's brilliance, America's are of America, you need to sell America on what you also are providing as a friend to America. And he's like, we don't see that. So you might want to adjust that. Number 6, he talks about Iran. He says, my generation grew up with disasters in Afghanistan and Iraq. We were promised that there were WMDs in Iraq, which proved to be a lie. Our generation was also lied by the governments of Israel and the US that COVID vaccines were safe and effective. Israeli intelligence missed the boat on October 7th, but now we're asked to trust Israeli intelligence 100% that Iran is on the cusp of obtaining nuclear weapons. Young conservatives are very skeptical of government proclamations. Again, young conservatives are very skeptical of government proclamations. We don't fully trust intelligence assessments. Many agree with you, he says, myself included, that Iran should not get nuclear weapons. But at the same time, I share concern that America will get sucked into another endless war costing thousands of American lives. Again, the complexities of international relations, foes and allies being laid out in a way that's very simple. He's saying, look, this is where we're coming from in America. My generation is coming from, why we don't trust government, why we certainly don't trust foreign government. And you guys aren't doing a good job of showing us why we have a serious threat of Iran. You should do a better job at explaining that so that the Americans who are my generation, who have lived through a whole lot of lies, can actually trust what you're putting out. Number 7, he says a paradigm shift is needed in how Israel presents itself to the world, especially on social media. Again, he keeps going on to social media. He says right now there's essentially a massive negative ad campaign spreading on social media. And then he goes into this whole thing, and I really want you guys to read this whole letter about, and I think it was real, again, just very brilliant in how he talks through the issue of how our generation consumes news is very different than our parents and our grandparents. I mean, our parents didn't even have social media. So he's talking about you guys like haven't evolved in a way that actually can reach my generation and the generation before me. They're not consuming nighttime news. They're going to TikTok. They're going to Facebook. They're going to Instagram and X. That's where they're getting their news. And you guys aren't putting anything out there that's going to actually help them understand what I'm trying to tell them. And now the pressure is on me as a surrogate, and you guys aren't doing what you should be doing. So he says, sorry for the brutal honesty, but Israel's approach to social media is PR malpractice. Your candidate, that's what he calls Israel, your candidate, because he's like, just think of it as like a PR campaign where you have, let me see where he says it. He says, okay, he says political campaigns face this challenge all the time. Many of the PR challenges Israel faces should be looked at through the prism of a political campaign. Okay, so he's saying just focus on Israel as if she was a political candidate. And then he says, for brutal honesty, Israel's approach to social media is PR malpractice. Your candidate should list all the toughest questions she gets on the campaign trail with detailed expert responses and footnotes on her ITN website, and then use social media to explain her platform on a daily basis. Fake news becomes real news if there's not effective pushback. Can I get an amen? Fake news becomes real news if there's not effective pushback. And he's basically saying, you guys are losing it because you aren't addressing what Charlie viewed as fake news. And he was seeing it firsthand with the questions that were coming at him when he would tour college campuses. He also said that a recent Pew Research poll showed 53% of Americans now have an unfavorable view of Israel, up from 42% 3 years ago. He says a new media strategy is urgently needed. From my vantage point, Israel has retreated from social media without a fight. How are you going to win over younger generations if you're starting out in retreat on social media? Mr. Prime Minister, stop this retreat and get in the information war. He says that the majority of staff in Israel's efforts should be in the 20 to 30 age demographic because the older generation alone is not going to win the information war on social media, which is so right. He says, I've seen your IDF spokesman defend Israel standing at a dimly lit podium. This looks like a scene out of the 1970s, like some old Walter Cronkite clips of the TV news. You need to tear down your old ways of communicating and start over from scratch. And then he goes into the frustration he had in feeling that he's a lone wolf with just a few others in trying to defend through nuance the relationship that is important to America with Israel. And he said, Israel needs more first person voices to defend her. How can Israel defend and define itself if you don't even have spokespersons out there fighting back every day? He says, do you even have a press secretary like Caroline Levitt or defenders like Stephen Miller? If not, I encourage you to go find them. You need more Israeli spokespersons who are effective speakers in the media and on social media. And then he wraps it up with saying, the question is whether Israel has the willpower to step up its game in this information war. From my vantage point, the status quo is not working. Israel is getting crushed on social media, and you are losing younger generations of Americans, even among MAGA conservatives. In my opinion, you are losing the information war, which will eventually translate into less political and military support from America. The Holy Land is so important to my life, and it pains me to see support for Israel slip away. Feel free to contact me on my private number below if you would like to discuss this further. Sincerely, signed, Charlie Kirk. That's the letter, guys. And it's linked below so you can read it. And I would encourage you to, because there has been so much chatter on this letter and what the full contents do or do not have. I will say too, Stella Escobodo, she put out on September 20th, I believe, she put out a short video because she said that she had a source who had seen this letter. And so she covered the contents of the letter, and it was verbatim of what we're seeing now. So there's a lot to legitimize this letter, again, being actually from Charlie Kirk to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. So I think that what is important is that obviously there has been a lot of tales told. Maybe some are true, maybe some are not. But I know that a big one was on this whole Charlie Kirk has been blackmailed, and there's a letter, like the full contents are going to prove it. And really, what it looks like is it was just really good strategy in terms of international relations from someone who gets the heartbeat of the youth in America saying, you guys are losing the information war. I love Israel. Like, I'm America first, but I love Israel. And what you guys are doing isn't working because I'm getting hit with so many questions every time. I think he said at some point 50% of his questions on campus were on Israel. And he's like, I can't be a first person spokesperson for Israel. You guys need to step it up and do what you need to do if you want to get in this information war. So then I can carry that message out, but I can't be the only one doing this. So I think I would just encourage you again, read the entirety of the letter. You don't even have to agree with all of it. You really don't. And I'm sure some of you are going to say the letter is fake. That's fine. We have it as of now on good authority that this is a legitimate letter from Charlie Kirk to Netanyahu. And it's not even about who you like or who you don't like, or if you like America supporting Israel, or if you don't like America supporting Israel, or you think that all the things, that's irrelevant to this conversation. This conversation is about putting to rest a lot of the chatter about what the full contents of this letter allegedly held, which has now been, again, allegedly revealed. And you can read it below. I do just want to remind you guys that Charlie's position was fully America first, but he also saw the importance and his love for wanting to protect Jerusalem, which he called the Holy Land, from what he called barbaric Islam. And he talked to Megyn Kelly about that shortly before his assassination, but that he resented hostile reaction for any nuance in his support from either side. And I just think that that needs to be a takeaway, that we can see two things being true, that he was in a position where he was being accused of being a paid apologist, and he was also being accused, and there was tremendous pressure put on him to be even more pro-Israel. And he was saying, I can't do it alone. You guys have to get in the fight. You guys have to. Nowhere in this was there anything about money, about taking money, about money being offered that he was saying he wasn't going to take. That's nowhere in this letter. Nor is there anything about blackmail in this letter, or him saying, stop blackmailing me. Nothing of the sort, not even any hints of that in this letter. So I wanted to talk through it with you. And then if you do want to read it in full, which I encourage you to, it will be linked below. If this helps you, if it gives you a little clarity on what can be a very confusing conversation, then please like this and share this and subscribe wherever you are listening. We put out videos once a week right now to help you walk through faith, culture, politics, and health in a way that cuts through the noise. So I hope this helped you, and I'll see you again soon.